Hawa leo wana kazi, ingeweka moja pale nyingine. Hao leo wana kazi. Mpaka ishi. Ile tu utaongea tu ile wakati amemaliza kusoma. Utaongea kwanza. Utachukua hiyo time kwa tu moja kwa hiyo. Sasa nataka kuweka huko jioni, sitaenda huko. Niweke huko. Haya, ada na microphone. Beba sio wake. Ana na microphone. Ile itakuwa na sauti. Watu wewe unasikia unless mtu mmoja hapo nje. But that's why we have from here
Good morning. So, welcome to our court session, which is going to be our last court session with this petition. The judgment is ready. I'm going to read it from the first word to the last word.
Welcome to Makueni High Court. Mention petition E001 of 2022. The parties are petitioner, Dr. Patrick Musimba, first respondent, the IDP, second respondent, the county returning officer of Makueni County, the third respondent, the third respondent, Mutula.
Court order is as follows. Maintain your phone silent at all times. No clap, no cheering, no cheering. The proceedings have been recorded, so kindly maintain silence and translate. Mekanile hapo chini. Simu zile kana simu zile kana si na wasema nini? Waija kuna mamoko. Waija ukaga kana pole ni akeka ngea mondo na nitiende na record kwa ando maki. Welcome.
On behalf of the petitioner, my name is Steve Kimathi. Oh.
Good morning, my lord. My name is
Lord Shalom Level, together with Ms. Kathy Kilonzo, Mr. Dennis Dono, and Ms. Rulling Makotsi, for the third respondent.
Thank you. As I was saying, welcome to our last court session with this petition. Also, was contemplating or push it forward with some other emergencies, but I have to push myself to finish up with this petition. And I think we want to cause further anxiety on playing this matter, despite the other social issues that are affecting my operations. And so I'll deliver this judgment as I've said, and I'll read word to word from the first page, the last page. Deliberately so, in case of any mistake, I'll be able to detect. So then I start delivering your judgment. On the 9th August 2022, the people of Makueni County walked their respective polling stations to exercise their democratic right in electing their preferred political leaders in various categories or elected positions. Among the candidates who contested for the position of governor in Makueni County were Mutula Jr., who emerged victorious after garnering a total of 214,088 votes. Patrick Musimba, who secured second position with 63,022 votes. David Masika, 8,378 votes. Emmanuel Mutisia, 2,929 votes. And Anderson Kaloki, 843 votes. Consequently, on 13th August 2022, the county returning officer, hereafter the second respondent, declared the said Mutula Jr., hereafter the third respondent, as the duly elected governor Makueni County. This declaration was followed by a public gazette notice published on the 19th August 2022 by the Independent Electoral and Boundary Commission, hereafter the first respondent, the body constitutionally charged with the mandate of conducting and supervising elections or referenda in Kenya, declaring the third respondent as governor, Makueni County, and Lucy Mulili as his deputy governor. The two were subsequently sworn and effectively assumed their respective offices on 25th September 2022. Dissatisfied with the results and declaration of the third respondent as governor of Makueni County, the petitioner lodged a petition 38 September 2022 and filed on 9 September 2022 seeking the credit. Immediately after the filing of the petition, the first respondent who are favorable of election activities including elections, devices, and improvements used for the election. Immediately upon the filing of the petition, the first respondent would not access to the electronic devices which were used to transmit the source to the study center. Immediately upon the filing of the petition, the first respondent provided details of the used by the officers and access to their respective notes to the procedure study center. Immediately upon the filing of the petition, the first respondent provides certified copies of the opportunities of forms prepared and obtained from the polling stations. Immediately upon the filing of the petition, the first respondent provide the IP address of each Kenyan integrated election management system schemes which used at each of the polling stations. Immediately upon the filing of the petition, the first respondent provides specific GPS locations used use of each polling station used and including all aspects of that. Immediately upon the filing of the petition, the first respondent provides a certified list of all cases. Immediate device identifiers, meaning unique access control, MSC address, direction by equipment identical name, number, SIM cards, and their numbers as they were procured, used and use of for streaming detection. Immediately upon the filing of the petition, the first respondent provide the count of voters identified by KIMS gates at all polling stations by biometric data, alphanumeric search, manual register, and the overall count that includes voters found and those not found. Immediately upon the filing of the petition, the first respondent provide KIMS kit logs, including login details of the users, opening and closing time, voters' identification numbers, the device MSC addresses, and the mode of identification, timestamp, and the course of polling station. Immediately upon the filing of the petition, the first respondent provide all the Form 32As relating to voter identification and verification, all Form 337As, all polling station diaries, and all Form 41 respective reports pertaining to assisted voting. An order B and is hereby made for the scrutiny of the rejected stray, spoiled, ballot papers recount of all the votes in respect of poll and total. An order B and is hereby made for the returning of all the votes cast in 1,130 in the county. And order B and is hereby made for the scrutiny, forensic audit of all equipment, system and technology, and the complementary manual register used by the first respondent in the gubernatorial election. A declaration B and is hereby made that the non-compliance with the law, irregularities, and improprieties in the gubernatorial election were so substantial and significant, and that they affected the result thereof. A declaration B and is hereby made that the gubernatorial election held on 9th August 2022 was not conducted in accordance with the Constitution and the applicable electoral law, rendering the invalid, null, and void. A declaration B and is hereby made that the third and fourth respondent was not validly declared as a governor-elect and deputy governor-elect. That was, I think, in anticipation that somebody was made a fourth respondent, Mr. Kimani. Okay. A declaration B and is hereby made that the third and fourth respondent, of course, because the fourth respondent was not there, was not validly declared as governor-elect and deputy governor-elect respectively, and the declaration announced on 13th August 2022 and published on 19th August 2022 is invalid and avoid abolition. An order B and is hereby issued pushing the certificate to the third respondent until a set notice number declaring the third respondent as governor-elect. An order B and is hereby made directing the first respondent to organize and conduct a first gubernatorial election in strict conformity with the Constitution and Elections Act and all legislations enacted thereafter. Course of the petition and other and or further orders that the court deems just and fit to grant in the circumstances. Contemporaneously filed with the petition under certificate of urgency was an also motion dated 8 September 2022, seeking supply of election materials, retiring and scrutiny of all votes cast in the entire county. After canvassing the application, this honorable court did not find merit in it, hence dismissed the same on 21st December 2022. Subsequently, the petitioner lodged an application for review dated 6 January 2023 and filed on 9th January 2023, because it was dismissed on 3rd February 2023. Petitioner's case. The petitioner's case hearing is anchored in the particular set out on the face of the petition and affirmance contained in the affidavit in support thereof. From the onset, the petition highlighted on the salient legal provisions governing conduct of election exercise in Kenya and Tanzania, Article 38 of the Constitution on the right to free, fair, and regular elections, Article 10 on the binding principles of good governance on all state organs, including the courts, Article 81 regarding the freedom of citizens in exercising their political right through universal suffrage, free and fair elections conducted in a transparent, impartial, neutral, efficient, accurate, and accountable. Section 39 of the Elections Act on the manner in which IEBC is supposed to conduct elections and declare results, and Section 24 of the Elections Act, which provides for the use of technology. In his affidavit in support of the petition sworn on 8 September 2022, the petitioner stated that the first respondent did not conduct a credible, free, and fair elections in Makueni County. He averred that on 6 August 2022, the first and second respondent during a media and county candidates briefing at Water Technical Training Institute confirmed that all systems for the election for Makueni County had been tested and were ready, that they had conducted a resource transmission simulation, system checks, and confirmed the same was functional. But contrary to the state assurance, 140 Kim's kits were inoperable in Makueni County at the time polls opened on the elections day. The petitioner further stated there was no proper testing on the Kim's kit which affected their functionality, thus rendering them inoperable. The first respondent failed to meet its constitutional and statutory obligation to provide functional Kim's kits to ensure it presided over credible, fair, secure, and transparent elections as provided for under Article 6 of the Constitution. He averred that the use of manual voting system was characterized by numerous irregularities which could have been avoided if there was proper preparation, planning, and advanced testing of the Kim's kits allocated to Makueni County. That the Kim's kits failure disenfranchised and or suppressed voters' turnout in the entire county, particularly the West constituency, where 84 polling stations out of 206 were affected. That is, polling stations Sekereni Primary School, voters started queuing as early as 4 a.m., but Kim's kits failure led to many of them leaving their polling stations in frustration without voting. The petitioner further deposed that the manual register was not available in most polling stations, as it took the first respondent over 6 hours from the time the polling stations opened to issue directions on the use of complementary voting register, by which time most voters had already left after waiting for long hours to vote. He further stated that despite the Makueni County gubernatorial election being peaceful, the counting and tallying process was characterized by irregularities which caused unexplained discrepancies in respect to the votes cast for various elected positions as follows: presidential 290,491, governor 39538, senator, 290. 29550, women representative 29465. He expressed the view that the said discrepancies were unexplained, thus confirming that the election exercise was not credible, fair, transparent, and accountable. First and second respondents' response. In response to the petition, the first and second respondent lodged a response dated 20th September 2022 and filed on 21st September 2022. They denied the allegation that they had failed on their mandates to preside over and conduct free, fair, transparent, reliable, and credible elections. That they discharged their respective duties and mandates in accordance with the electoral laws, specifically Article 10, 27, 38, 81, and 86 of the Constitution, Section 39 of the Elections Act. That the second respondent duly received all forms that 7As and 7Bs from all the constituency returning officers in the county, which were verified and corrected in the presence of all agents of the gubernatorial candidates present before the announcement of the final result. It was further averred that the petition does not disclose the grounds for which the petition as contemplated under Rule 8 of the Elections Parliamentary and County Petition Rules 2017. That the petitioner misread and totally misinterpreted the quoted except of the first respondent press release of 13 June 2022 in quotes, open quotes, response to concerns by Senior Umoja, one party coalition party regarding G22, end of quotes. In their view, the first respondent confirmed that paragraph 6 of the said press release that it would be guided by the NASA versus IPC 2017 case, which adopted the first respondent's protocol to use printed register of voters upon confirmation that the Kim's kits have completely failed and there was no possibility of repair. That the issue of use of an alternative mode of voter identification in the event the technology deployed by the first respondent failed was dealt with in the case of the United Democratic Alliance Party versus Kenya Human Rights Commission and 12 other civil application number 288 of 2022. He stated that the alphanumeric search referred to in paragraph 27 of the petition is an alternative system which is used by the Kim's kits to identify voters whose biometrics cannot be read. They further stated that that method can only be done by a functioning Kim's kit, while the complementary system, which comprises of the use of a manual register, is only applicable once the Kim's kit completely fails and cannot be repaired. They confirmed the fact that there was a media briefing held on 6th August 2022 in which the first respondent confirmed that the systems used during the election had been tested and were ready. Further tests comprising of checking and availability of all the accompanying components, powering on and off of the Kim's kits, and launching of the voter identification applications were conducted at the county as well as the constituency distribution centers, and that the results transmission simulation exercise in respect of the presidential election results was concluded. Regarding the procurement of Kim's kits from Smartmatic, it was stated that the first respondent had done an inventory for 5,000 Kim's kits, out of which 41,000 were in good condition. That Smartmatic only supplied the first respondent with 14,100 kits, making them with 5,100 Kim's kits, which were in good condition. Thus, the allegation that they failed to procure and provide functional Kim's kits amounts to undermining the integrity, credibility, and security of the governmental elections. That the Kim's kits dispatched to various constituencies in Mutula County were properly tested before dispatch and no apparent defects were discovered. It was further stated that the defects discovered on the day of the election related to opening of the polling stations for voter identification, and such defects could not have been discovered during the testing exercise as the QR code could not be scanned to commence polling earlier than the designated time. That had the kits been subjected to a scanning test of QR codes before the day of the election, it would have amounted to opening of the polling stations prior to the day of the election, which is an illegality. But the 36 additional Kim's kits for Kibwezi West constituency, which registered the same defects, were not enough to cover the 84 polling stations which were affected by the malfunctioning kits. They further stated that Kim's kits failure affected all the candidates in all the 6 elective positions equally, and that all the voters were given a chance to vote for candidates of their choice using the manual register. Thus, there was no irregularity. They denied and described the allegation that Kim's kits were intentionally manipulated as spaces and unsubstantiated. It was their contention that any delay that may have been experienced in adopting the use of manual register was occasioned by the requirement for a detailed procedure. The first respondent and its officers are mandated to adhere to prior to the suspension of the use of technology used in an election, as well as printing and distribution of Form 32As, which will be used alongside the manual register. The process is provided from 26 of the Elections Technology Regulation 2017. They asserted that the time lost in solving the challenges posed by the Kim's kits failure was duly compensated as required by the law by extending the voting period after 5 p.m. by commensurate period. According to them, there was neither disenfranchisement nor suppression of voters. The voter turnout for the 84 polling stations where the manual registers were used had a similar, if not higher, voter turnout than other polling stations within Kibwezi West constituency. Neither does the same vary significantly from the polling stations where Kim's kits were used. That Makueni County, having presented 41% of the 8 Kim's kits countrywide, is not enough proof that the election was marred with irregularities or irregularities. Concerning the discrepancies in the number of votes cast for different paroles, the response was that they were not caused by inflation of results or any other irregularity, but rather minor and changing reasons duly communicated to the affected candidates. But in any event, the petitioner has not charged the burden of proof on inflation of votes to the required degree. Finally, they urged the court to dismiss the petition. Third respondent's response. The third respondent in response to the petition presented its reply dated 28 September 2022 and filed on 21 September 2022. Thus, opposing the petition by denying the allegations on the grounds that the election was conducted in a free, fair, transparent, simple, accurate, accountable, and verifiable manner. The same was conducted in accordance with the Constitution, electoral laws, and regulations thereunder. It is the third respondent's case that the petition does not set out firm and credible evidence of alleged departures from the Constitution, electoral laws, and regulations thereunder. He is a stranger to the press release of 10th June 2022, allegedly issued by the chairperson of the first respondent. But even if it was, such declaration could not supersede electoral laws of the Supreme Court decision in the 2013 election petition case, where the Supreme Court noted that manual register could be reverted to in case there was failure of the election technology. It was further stated that there was no disenfranchisement, no suppression of voters in Makueni County as alleged. Voting time was extended to the affected areas, and no evidence of a single voter was turned away or not allowed to vote on account of alleged failure of Kim's kits was tendered. He went further to state that the petitioner did not sufficiently plead the issues raised in the petition, which renders the petition incurably effective. Lastly, the court was urged to dismiss the petition. Hearing. During the hearing, the petitioner adopted the particulars in his petition and affirmance contained in his affidavit in support. He told the court how he woke up very early in the morning on the election day, ready to vote. To his surprise, he was told that the Kim's kits had failed to function and could not vote. But upon inquiry, he was informed that the problem of dysfunction of Kim's kits had only affected the West constituency. He went on to state that it was until 12 midday when voters were allowed to vote manually. Absentee voters were allowed to vote, thus rendering the integrity of the voting as useless and questionable. There was external interference with the Kim's kits. Guidelines for operation of ICT infrastructure was not followed. Tendering regulations were not adhered to. All IC kits had manuals, hence the kit problem was voidable and easy to address, but the first respondent ignored the same. He contended that if the electoral process is flawed, the outcome cannot be justified. According to him, most voters retired to their homes, hence could not vote due to the delay in the commencement of the voting exercise, thus voter separation. He went further to question the delay in tallying of the votes, with some constituencies like Mboni announcing their results after 4 days. On cross-examination by Mr. Nyaburi, he admitted that in his polling station at Sekeleni, voting time was extended to compensate for the lost time. Regarding the question of absentee and aided voters, he clarified that he did not witness any at this polling station. He further confirmed that he had no agent in any of the polling centers in the entire county, save for the chief agent. On their part, the first and second respondents called the witnesses, among them Mesanderitu RW1, County ICT Officer Makueni County, Evan Srigidin Chingomano, returning officer West constituency RW2, and Morris Kepoer area, County returning officer Makueni County RW3. RW1 adopted the content contained in his affidavit sworn on 20 September 2022, wherein he explained on the voting process using Kimskis. He told the court on 19th July 2022, Makueni County received 90 kits for purposes of training election officials. He went further to say that on 4th August 2022, they received 1,220 kits which were tested and kept in the warehouse by the constituency ICT clerks. That on 8th August 2022, further testing was done at the constituency. He was highly surprised when the Kim's kits made 4 polling stations within Kibwezi West constituency failed to function as they displayed a further validation error icon. He stated that upon realizing the anomaly, he reached out to the county ICT clerks, Smartmatic, the vendor, and the commission's ICT directorate to try and resolve the problem. He went further to inform the county elections manager RW3 to contact the headquarters for intervention. But whenever effort to resolve the problem failed, the commission authorized the use of complementary method of voting by use of manual voting register, which exercise commenced swiftly upon authorization, and the lost time compensated accordingly. It was his testimony that Form 32A was duly filled in accordance with the law, and that none of the voters was prejudiced by the failure of Kim's kits. He denied the claim that there was failure on their part. On his part, RW2 adopted his affidavit sworn on 20th September 2022 as his evidence. He corroborated the testimony of RW1 insofar as preparedness of the election exercise by IPC was concerned, and the events that occurred on the voting day. That after being informed of the failure of the Kim's kits, he reported the county elections manager, who escalated the matter to the IPC headquarters, and thereafter received instructions to conduct the elections manually using the manual register with necessary moderation of time to compensate for the wasted time. That he facilitated the printing and filing of Form 32A, and each assisted voter was assisted by a different person as required by the law. It was evidence that all the information on the rejected ballot papers was captured in the respective Form 41, and also in the constitution directives. That after most of the voting exercise, those cast at polling station were counted, tabulated in full at 7 days. They saw thereof announced by the respective presiding officers. He stated that after most of the voting exercise, we received the physical form at 7 days from the presiding officers of all 106 polling stations in the West constituency, in the presence of the gubernatorial candidates. Was his testimony, the agency didn't raise any objection to the authenticity of the physical form that 7 days, which he used to tally and announce the gubernatorial source, and subsequently populated from that 7 D, in the presence of the agency present for onward transmission to the county service. In fact, I told the court that the vote turnout percentage in the affected polling stations were consistent with the turnout in the polling stations where King's kits were used. As the allegation that King's kits failure affected better turnout solution. The Makueni County gubernatorial election was conducted in accordance with the law. Any discrepancies with regularities that might have occurred were so insignificant it would not affect the outcome of the RW3 Morris Kepoer area also adopted the content of this affidavit sworn on 20 September 2022. He basically corroborated the testimony of RW1 and 2 regarding the events and failure of King's kits on 9th August 2022. That on the election day at 6 a.m., he received a report that 84 kits in 84 polling stations had failed. But the problem was unique as they could not have scanned the QR code before time stipulated for voting would commence. That it spiked RW1 immediately to find out what the problem was, but was in vain. He stated that after escalating the problem with a duly prepared report by his ICT department, he was authorized to advise the officials in the affected polling stations centers to use manual registering voting. In his view, manual voting did not affect further turnout, nor was any voter locked out as the lost time was compensated. That the votes cast were tabulated, results announced, and from 7A and 7B filled without an objection. Regarding the discrepancy in the results from different electoral positions, He explained as follows. Results for women rep from Kasheria, Kaseuni, Kivian, and Komboyo were disregarded in the final tally as the valid votes exceeded the registered voters. No governor women rep results were received from Ngaka and Katurumbi primary schools. No votes were cast for the position of Senator in Djibouti primary for lack of voting papers or paroles, and the presence of stray and spoiled papers which were all accounted for. According to him, the differences were insignificant to invalidate the results. On his part, the third respondent adopted his response to the petition, and they evidently in support thereof sworn on 21 September 2022. He basically told the court that the election exercise was conducted in accordance with the Constitution and relevant electoral laws. He stated the petition was defective and incompetent and did not enjoin the deputy governor as a party, nor did it treat all issues as required in law. He literally supported the first and second respondent's case to the extent that the failure of King's Kids was nobody's fault and that manual voting did not prejudice any voter. He denied the allegation that there was inordinate delay in voting and that the lost time was compensated by extending voting time. Regarding voters who did not vote, it was his testimony that none of the alleged voters came forth claimed denial of voting rights. On the voter turnout by constituency, it was his evidence that there was no much difference between Kibwezi West constituency, where manual voting took place, and the others where electronic voting applied. But in Kibwezi East, with electronic voting, the turnout was lower than Kibwezi West at 57.7% and 58.61% respectively. Upon course of the hearing, parties agreed to file submissions, petitioner submissions. The petitioner through his advocate, Andrew and Steve advocates, filed submissions dated 4th January 2023, together with a list of authorities. Senate Council reiterated the content contained in the particulars of the petition as well as the affidavit in support. Council submitted the electoral system adopted by the first respondent was meant to comply with the provisions of Article 81 of the Constitution, whereas the first respondent was mandated to comply with the provisions of Article 86 of the Constitution. But in determination and declaration of results, the first respondent was mandated to comply with the provisions of Section 39 of the Elections Act and the Part 2 and 3 of the Elections Technology Regulations 2017, which provides for acquisition, storage, deployment, testing, and certification of the election technology. According to Mr. Kimathi, the petitioner has discharged his burden of proof, and therefore the elections could not be deemed to be free, fair, verified, and accredited. It was Council's submission that electoral laws and regulations are meant to protect the right to vote and the legitimate expectation of the citizens that the elections could be conducted in compliance with the law for the same to be free, fair, credible, and transparent. In Council's view, these elements were missing in the instant case. On whether there was electronic failure in the voting process in Makueni County in the election, and if so, whether that compromised voter turnout, Council submitted that it was not in dispute that there was electronic failure in the voting process in Makueni County, that the same could have been avoided had the first respondent discharged his mandate required under Regulation 8 of the Election Technology Regulations 2017. He contended that the problem would have been fixed easily by use of the kid's mind. It was further submitted the problem would have as well been detected before the voting day had the first respondent conducted end-to-end testing exercise. Council opined that the time taken to escalate the issue to the headquarters on the failure of King's Kids to secure approval to use the manual register was inordinately long and in breach of the directions of the Court of Appeal in United Democratic Alliance Party versus Kenya Human Rights Commission to receive application number E288 of 2022 and the provisions of Rule 69E1E of the Elections General Regulations. In Council's view, the delay was attributable to poor preparation and training of the first respondent staff who were only trained in troubleshooting as a method of addressing the King's Kids failure. It was Council's submission that the discrepancy in the average voter turnout in the country and Makueni County shows there was disenfranchisement of voters in Makueni owing to the failure of the King's Kids. Council placed reliance in the case of Morgan v. Simpson, 1974, Orange Road Post, 722 page, to express the position that the election was conducted in a manner that was so close and not substantially in conformity with the law vitiating the end result. On whether the use of manual register voting system compromised the credibility, verifiability, integrity, and transparency of the declared the results. Council advised the court the case of United Democratic Alliance Party versus Kenya Human Rights Commission and 12 other supra on the use of complementary mechanism and the filling of Form 32A. Council submitted that Form 32A, which was supposed to be signed by the presiding officer or agents and the voter prior to issuance of 6 ballot papers, was not filled. Mr. Kimathi contended that there was no doubt that the petitioner as a registered voter was never issued Form 32A, which was mandatory, and the only way the use of manual register could pass the viable and credible test of the elections was by filling Form 32A. That the issuance of a blanket order on the use of manual register and the fact that there were stations with high voter turnout, then the registered voters compromised the credibility and verifiability of the exercise. Touching on whether the first respondent carried out the verification of the results in accordance with the applicable electoral laws, Council submitted the tallying process was characterized by irregularities such as inflating of results, with polling stations in excess of the registered voters, and lack of transparency in tabulation and submission of results. That the counting of the votes was undertaken in a manner that contravened Section 38A of the Elections Act, Rule 692 of the Elections General Regulations 2012, and Article 81 of the Constitution. On the question whether there were unexplained discrepancies to the votes cast for the county governor's position and the other elected positions, Council relied on Regulation 69, 2 and 3, 70, 73, 75, and 81, 2D of the Elections General Regulations, thus submitting that the petitioner had discharged his burden of proof, and the same had shifted to the first and second respondent. On whether the third respondent was fairly elected, Council relied on Raila Odinga and another versus IBC and others petition number 1 2017, where the court observed that the irregularities and errors were not minor and inconsequential as they were due to non-compliance with the law during testing and deployment of election technology used in the elections. The court was further referred to the case of Randy Maxwell Kibuti versus the Independent Election Boundaries Commission, IBC, and 3 others, 2018 PPRL, where it was said that the irregularities or non-compliance with the electoral laws and procedures undermined the electoral process. Regarding costs, Council submitted the same should be awarded against the first respondent. In conclusion, Council urged the court to allow the petition as per first and second respondent submissions. The first and second respondents through the advocates, Iseme, Kamau, and Mahema advocates, filed the written submission dated 17 January 2023 and submitted on the 7 issues set down by the court in the trial directions. At the onset, reference was made to salient legal principles governing the electioneering process and the relevant case law which have taken into account. Concerning the question whether there was electronic failure in Makueni gubernatorial election exercise, and whether the said failure compromised the voter turnout, Council relied on the evidence tendered by their witnesses. It was contended that despite the Kim's Kids failure, the voter turnout in the affected polling station was consistent. To buttress that position, Council placed the reliance in the Supreme Court case of Raila Odinga and another versus IPC and others, petition number A005 of 2022, where the court held that Kibwezi West voters were not disenfranchised by virtue of manual voting. That every voter was granted an opportunity to vote by extension of closing hours by the time of hours lost. Thus, the King's Kids failures did not compromise the voter turnout. On whether the use of manual voting system compromised the credibility, verifiability, integrity, accountability, and transparency of the declared results, Council submitted the Elections Technology Regulations 2017 under Rule 26 contemplated the failure of King's Kids and the prescribed an alternative mechanism for the verification in the event of such failure. That the unpredictability of technology failure led the Court of Appeal in the case of United Democratic Alliance Party versus Kenya Human Rights Commission to allow Supra to allow the use of a complementary mechanism in the 9th August 2022 general elections, subject to observance of the conditions set by the court under Rule 26 above. Council further submitted that the issue of filling from that 2A, the affected polling station, was conclusively considered in Raila 2022 presidential election petition, where the court held that the voters were granted the right to vote manually, and the website from the 2A field successfully in Kibwezi West constituency and Kakamega County. That the said decision applies in the gubernatorial election, as a voter was only required to fill from the 2A for the 6 powers. That the petition did not produce any evidence by any voter who was identified manually in any of the affected polling stations and who did not fill from the 2A. There was no complaint from the voters or candidates on the failure to fill from the 2A. Many of the affected polling stations are factors that were supported by the evidence of RW2 and RW3. Council further submitted that the failure of the Kim's kits in the 83 polling stations in Kibwezi West constituency affected all candidates in all the 6 positions and not just the petitioner alone. That the failure only affected the opening time of the polling stations and not the voters' right to vote. Council submitted that the petitioner did not adduce any evidence to show how use of the manual registers compromised the credibility, verifiability, integrity, accountability, and transparency of the elections. On the issue of the first respondent carried out the verification, tallying, and declaration of the results in accordance with the applicable electoral laws, Council submitted that the petitioner did not specify the polling stations that were affected by the counting and tallying irregularities, neither that he indicate the nature of the irregularities. That generalization of allegations lacking specificity was condemned by the court in the Indian case of Charan Rao Shah and others versus C in 1985, where the Chief Justice in that bench held that lack of a specific plea puts the respondent at a great disadvantage. On whether there were unexplainable discrepancies between the votes cast for the county governor's position and other elected positions, Council submitted the RW3 explained in detail the cause for the apparent discrepancy in the total number of votes cast for the 6 positions within Makueni County. That the discrepancy is so insignificant that it cannot affect the outcome of the gubernatorial election. Council asserted that the said circumstances were experienced by all candidates across board and no evidence that the petitioner was uniquely affected was tendered. As to whether the third respondent was fairly elected, Council submitted the petitioner did not controvert the final results of the gubernatorial election. On whether the result can issue, Council submitted the first and second respondent discharged their mandate in accordance with the law, resulting in a credible election where the third respondent emerged the winner. Council urged the court to find that none of the relief sought by the petitioner ought to issue. As to who is to bear the cost, Council opined that cost for the event, hence the petitioner bears the cost of the petition for dragging the respondents to court on unsubstantiated allegations. In conclusion, the court was urged to dismiss the petition with cost the respondent. Third respondent submissions. The third respondent, through his advocates, Chalombo and Associates, filed his submissions, written submissions dated 18th January 2023. Council submitted on the issue set down during case management conference as the issues for determination. On the first issue, Council relied on Section 44 of the Elections Act that submitted the first respondent complied with the said provision by ensuring that the electoral technology to be used during the elections was procured within timelines, chiefly. That RW2 confirmed that the Kim's kits were extensively tested before the elections to ensure that they were functional and working. Council relied on Raila 2022 election petition and submitted that the Kim's kits deployed for use in the election were in good condition and that laws for procuring the election technology were followed. It was Council's further submission that they were well over. There is no perfect elections or technology. To certify that assertion, Council relied on the Supreme Court holding Ovinga and 5 others, and the furthest the Independent Election Boundaries Commission and furthest 2013 Kenya reports. It was Council's contention that failure in technology did not affect the outcome of the Makueni County gubernatorial election. On the second issue, it was submitted that the electronic failure did not compromise over voter turnout, and if it did, it did not only affect the petitioner but all candidates equally. There was no nexus between the Kim's kits failure and the voter turnout in Kibwezi West constituency, as it had the highest voter turnout compared to Kibwezi East constituency, which did not experience Kim's kits failure. At Sekeriani Primary School polling station, where the petitioner voted, the claims voter disenfranchisement had a voter turnout of 64.88, which was higher than the average voter turnout in the Makueni gubernatorial elections, and that nobody complained of intimidation or denial of the right to vote. On that issue, Council submitted that Section 44A of the Elections Act was introduced to cater for the use of a complementary mechanism in case of biometric identification system. Council relied on Regulation 26 and 69E Elections Technology Regulation 2017, which sets out the procedure before resorting to the use of manual register. In the Council's view, the said procedure was followed. That the need for a complementary system was considered in the case of National Super Alliance, NASA Kenya, versus Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission and 2 others, 2017, KRL, Civil Appeal number 258 of 2017, whereby the court observed that the IBC has a constitutional duty of balancing all the rights and ensuring all voters, especially those whose biometrics are not picked by King's, are accorded an opportunity to vote if they are genuinely registered voters who can be traced from the register of voters and who can be identified by their identification card or passport. Council further relied on the case of United Democratic Alliance versus Kenya Human Rights Commission, SUPRA, and submitted that forms 2A were only required where a voter was identified using the alphanumeric system or method. That form 2A was intended to provide an audit trail of those specific voters as they could not have been identified using the King's list. That the petitioner did not prove that the decision to resort to manual systems compromised the fairness, accuracy, variability, and credibility of the elections. On the fourth issue, it was submitted that in order to enhance transparency, accountability, accuracy, and credibility, scrutiny of votes was carried out at the polling stations after the poll to determine the valid and accurate number of votes cast for each candidate. And the same was done in the presence of agents before votes were counted. According to United Council, the procedure and the scrutiny of votes are set out in Regulation 75, 76, 77, and 8 of the elections regulations was done, and Section 9(1) of the election laws, Amendment 2016, which envisages that after counting of the ballots at each polling station, tallying of gubernatorial election results could be done by the constituency returning officers, who in turn submit their constituency results. The county returning officer was complied with. Senate Council submitted all accredited candidates' agents were allowed to verify the process, and that the petitioner did not provide any evidence to show that he had agents or that any of his agents raised any complaint on the procedure followed at the polling station. That the petitioner did not provide any evidence to show that the tallying process was marked with irregularities. Touching on the fifth issue, the Council reiterated the position of the first and second respondents on discrepancy of votes among the 6 elected positions. It contended that this court would only intervene if the alleged irregularities were of such a magnitude as would affect the outcome of the election result. On the sixth issue, Council submitted that the third respondent was hurriedly elected as governor of Makueni County, as he garnered the highest number of votes in the free and fair gubernatorial election. Council placed the reliance on the holding before the Supreme Court in the 2017 presidential election petition case of Raila Amolo Odinga and another versus Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission, SUPRA, to express the point that the burden of proof falls on the person alleging a fact, and that in this case, the petition has not met the required standard of proof. On the question whether the relief source should issue, Council submitted that the petitioner has not discharged the burden of proof with the petition, thus the same should not issue. Hence, I, the court, dismiss the petition of cause. As to who bears the cause, Council submitted the cause follow the events, and that in this case, the petitioner should bear the cause as he has failed to discharge the burden of proof on the allegations stated in the petition. In conclusion, Council, I, the court, to dismiss the petition. Analysis and determination. I have carefully considered the petition hearing together with the materials in support, various responses thereof, parties' respective oral testimonies, and rival submissions by Council on record. During the Pretoria conference, the court made various directions among them issues for determination. I would therefore not deviate from the predetermined issues for determination, which I will reproduce as hereunder. 1. Whether there was electronic failure in Makueni gubernatorial election exercise, and if so, whether the said failure compromised the voter turnout. 2. Whether the use of manual voting system compromised the credibility, verifiability, integrity, accountability, and transparency of the declared results. 3. Whether the first respondent carried out the verification, tallying, and declaration of the results in accordance with applicable electoral laws. 4. Whether there were unexplainable discrepancies between the votes cast for the county governor's position and other respective positions. 6. 5. Whether the third respondent was validly elected. 6. Whether the relief sought can issue. 7. Who bears the cost. There is no doubt that in every 5-year cycle of the electioneering exercise in Kenya, Kenyan courts have been a beehive of activities in electoral dispute litigation, quite often generated by the losers. Apparently, and by their very nature, such disputes are quite emotive, given the high premium attached to the positions contested. The conduct of national general elections in Kenya and the attendant disputes arising therefrom are governed by legal principles underpinned in the Constitution, various electoral laws, statutes, and subsidiary legislation. This court is therefore bound by the national values and principles of governance and Article 10(1) of the Constitution to correctly apply and interpret the court, the Constitution, or another law for the sake of serving the Kenyan people who are the donors of such powers. In determining election disputes, a number of critical legal provisions come to play. Article 38(2) of the Constitution thus recognizes the right of a Kenyan citizen in an election exercise. It provides that every citizen has the right to free, fair, and regular elections based on universal suffrage and the free expression of the will of the electors for A, any elected public body or office established under its constitution, and B, an office of any political party with the citizens are member. The right to vote is indeed an inalienable democratic right that cannot be compromised at the altar of anything else. In this case, I refer to the case of Richard Karembe Ndile and another first party to Musimba and two others, 2013, EKRL, where the court held that under our democratic form of government, an election is the ultimate expression of the people, and the electoral system is designed to ascertain the intent of the voters and to give it effect whenever possible. Article 81 of the Constitution, 81E of the Constitution further provides that the electoral system shall comply with the following principles: A, free and fair elections, which are 1, by secret ballot; 2, free from violence, intimidation, improper influence, or corruption, conducted by an independent body, transparent, and administered in an impartial, neutral, efficient, accurate, and accountable manner. Article 86 thus underscores the mandatory role of IBC in overseeing the conduct of elections so as to inspire confidence in the outcome. That provision thus commands as follows: at every election, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission shall ensure that A, whatever voting method is used, the system is simple, accurate, verifiable, secure, accountable, and transparent. B, the votes cast are counted, tabulated, and the results announced promptly by the presiding officer at each polling station. C, the results from the polling stations are openly and accurately collected and promptly announced by the returning officer. And D, appropriate structures and mechanisms to eliminate electoral malpractice are put in place, including the safekeeping of election materials. It then follows without any iota of doubt that confidence in the outcome of any election exercise is purely determined by the manner and style in which IPC conducts the exercise with integrity. In this regard, I refer to the case of William Kabogo Gitau versus George Bu and two others, 2010, EKRL, where the learned judge expressed the view that if there is any statutory body whose action should be considered to be above board and which should perform its duties to the required standard of integrity or probity, it should be the Electoral Commission. The Electoral Commission has a duty to inculcate and improve confidence in the electorate that it is processed, transparent, free, and fair. I would be speaking for many Kenyans when I state that the events subsequent to the 2007 elections made many Kenyans stand up and make note that an electoral process cannot, under circumstances, be compromised. Many Kenyans were ashamed when our country was referred in similar terms and in the same breath with a neighboring failed state. Kenya is not and cannot be considered as a banana or a grandmother republic. This court will stand up and be counted as not countenancing or tolerating electoral irregularities and malpractices. End of quotes. On the aspect of election dispute resolution, Article 7 of the Constitution does emphasize on the integrity of the election process by stating that 1, Parliament shall enact legislation to establish mechanisms for timely settlement of electoral disputes. 2, petitions concerning an election other than a presidential election shall be filed within 28 days of the declaration of the election results by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Service of a petition be direct or by advertisement and newspaper with national circulation. Section 83 of the Elections Act does provide as follows: notification of an election petition. A court shall not declare an election void for non-compliance with any written law, relating to that election if it appears that A, the election was conducted in accordance with the principles laid down in the Constitution and in that written law, and B, the non-compliance did not substantially affect the result of the election. Pursuant to Section 72 of the Interpretation of General Elections Act, up to a form prescribed by this Act or the regulation made thereafter shall not be void, variation or deviation from the requirements of that form, as long as the deviation is not calculated to mislead. Whereas the IBC is expected to be a neutral arbiter and the custodian of credible, transparent, and accountable election results, a party alleging the existence of any irregularities or malpractices in any election result bears the burden to prove to the required degree such allegations. It is tried that the standard of proof in an election petition is slightly above that of proof on appearance of probability and the period of proof beyond reasonable doubt. The same is therefore intermediary in nature. In this regard, the Supreme Court in Raila Amolo Odinga and others, and another, as Independent Election Boundaries Commission and others, Supreme Court Presidential Petition number 1 of 2017, Supra, held at paragraph 152 as follows. We maintain that in electoral disputes, the standard of proof remains higher than the appearance of probabilities, but lower than beyond reasonable doubt, and where allegations of criminal or quasi-criminal in nature are made, it is proved beyond reasonable doubt. It is tried law and a basic rule of evidence that he who alleges must prove. The petitioner has alleged multiple violations of electoral laws and massive irregularities alleged at the location by the first and second respondent, hence sought to nullify the election results. It is incumbent upon the petitioner to prove those allegations to the required degree. The principle regarding burden of proof is a statutory requirement clearly spelled out under Section 107 of the Evidence Act, of 80, which provides as follows: subsection 1, wherever decides any court to give judgment as to any legal right or ability dependent on the existence of facts which he asserts, must prove that those facts exist. Subsection 2, when a person is bound to prove the existence of any fact, it is said that the burden of proof lies on that person. To emphasize and underscore the importance of discharging the requisite burden of proof in an election petition, the Supreme Court, again in Raila Amolo Odinga and other versus Independent Election Boundaries Commission, Supra, held as follows. A petition seeking to nullify an election should clearly and decisively demonstrate that the conduct of the election was devoid of merits and so distorted as not to reflect the expression of the people's electoral intent, and that the evidence should disclose profound irregularities in the management of the electoral process. Having highlighted on the basic legal principles underpinning the process of electioneering and resolution of disputes emanating from such exercise, I now turn to the specific issues for determination. Whether there was electronic failure in Makweli gubernatorial election exercise. The crux of the petition hearing is the failure of technology during the 9th August 2022 voting exercise occasioned allegedly by dysfunctional KIMS kits deployed to about 84 polling stations within Kibwe's West constituency within Makweli County. It is tried law that the voting exercise in general elections in Kenya is managed electronically, save for exceptional circumstances where manual voting can apply through a complementary mechanism of voter identification. Section 44 of the Elections Act is clear on this issue to the extent that it provides as follows: use of technology. Subject to this section, there is established an integrated electronic electoral system that enables biometric voter registration, electronic voter identification, and electronic transmission of source. 2. The Commission shall, for purposes of subsection 1, develop a policy on the progressive use of technology in the electoral process. 3. The Commission shall ensure that the technology in use under subsection 1 is simple, accurate, verifiable, secure, accountable, and transparent. 4. The Commission shall, in an open and transparent manner, A, procure and put in place the technology necessary for the conduct of a general election at least 120 days before such elections, and B, test, verify, and deploy such technology at least 60 days before a general election. The Commission shall, in consultation with the relevant agencies, institutions, and stakeholders, make regulations for the better carrying into effect the provision of this section. From the wording of section 44 above quoted, the underlying words are that the Commission is mandatorily under obligation to ensure that the electronic voting system put in place is simple, accurate, verifiable, secure, accountable, and transparent. The objective of this provision is to ensure credibility and integrity in the election process, which is expected to be tamper-proof. However, while fully aware that technology which is human-made can fail, Parliament, in its wisdom, enacted an alternative under Section 44E of the Elections Act, thus provided that complementary mechanism of identification of voters, notwithstanding the provision of Section 44, the Commission shall put in place a complementary mechanism for identification of voters that is simple, accurate, verifiable, secure, accountable, and transparent to ensure that it complies with the provisions of Article 38 of the Constitution. It is, however, worth mentioning that on 10th June 2022, the chairperson of the first respondent issued a press release expressing the Commission's position that it was not intending to use manual register during the 9th August 2022 election exercise, as it was prone to manipulation and misuse. This was in response to various concerns raised then by some political parties, in particular, Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Party, seeking to know whether the IEBC was prepared to use manual register in case of electronic failure. It is common knowledge that the Commission's stand did trigger a legal dispute which ended up on appeal before the Court of Appeal in the case of United Democratic Alliance Party versus Kenya Human Rights Commission and 12 other supra, wherein the court sanctioned the use of complementary mechanism during the 9th August 2022 general elections. The Court of Appeal went further to give guidelines as follows. Presiding officers must ensure that voters are identified by biometrics upon production of an identification document used during registration, biometric verification. During registration, biometric verification is a primary mode of identifying voters. Where a voter cannot be identified using biometric, then the presiding officer shall use a complementary mechanism of alphanumeric search in the presence of the agents, and the voter shall fill Form 32A before being issued with the 6 ballot papers. C, the presiding officer will resort to the use of the printed register of the voters after approval from the Commission upon confirmation that the KIMS kit has completely failed and that there is no possibility of repair or replacement. The contents of the said memo dated 27 July 2027 shall be adhered to by all concerned persons in application for Regulation 69/23 of the Election General Regulations 2021. The decision taken by the Court of Appeal was intended to fulfill the aspiration of each Kenyan to participate in the election exercise to elect a leader of his or her choice, and without being locked out due to failures of the Commission or circumstances beyond human control. It has time and again been stated that technology is not 100% error-free, hence the need for a complementary mechanism by way of manual voting using a physical register. See the case of Rulling and 16 others versus Ruto and 10 others, the presidential election petition 2022, where the court stated technology, no matter how advanced, was bound to fail at one point or another, leading to a bad user experience. Hardware breaks, software bugs, and connectivity loss, among many challenges in automation. Imperfections in the process were inevitable. Some imperfections could have far-reaching ramifications, which in turn could lead to nullification of an election, where others may not reach that level or a degree of significance. The nullification of the presidential election of 2017 was partly based on that reality. Similar position was held in Raila 2013 between Raila and 5 others versus Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission and the other supra, where the court again held that we take judicial notice that, as with all electoral technologies, it is rarely perfect, and those employing it must remain open to the coming of new and improved technologies. In the instant case, RW2, the returning officer, Kibwezi West constituency, explained how he received 206 KIMS kits for his constituency. He stated that prior to 9th August 2022, the Commission had undertaken a training exercise for all staff involved in the election exercise. That on the material day at 6 a.m., he received calls from his presiding officers complaining that the KIMS kits were not working as they were displaying a data validation error message. According to him, he sent his ICT officers to the field to sort out the problem, but all in vain. Having escalated the issue to RW2 and 3, having escalated the issue, RW1, the count ICT officer, and RW3, the count returning officer, Having escalated the issue to RW1, the count ICT officer, and item 3, the count returning officer, approval to use manual register was granted. However, it is the petitioner's case that the error was as a result of external interference with the intention of manipulating results. Further, that the problem complained of was simple and could have been easily resolved at proper procurement improvement kits were done, proper training of the commission staff being done, followed by end-to-end testing pursuant to Regulation 8 of the Elections Technology Regulations. He further went on to state that had the commission used a KIMS kits manual from the FENIDA instead of troubleshooting method, it would have resolved the problem. There is no dispute that on 9 August 2022, KIMS kits in Kibwezi West constituents failed to function, hence manual voting as the last option. That fact was acknowledged equally in the presidential election petition in Raila versus Route 2022, where failure of KIMS kits in Kibwezi West constituents featured prominently. From the evidence of RW1, RW2, and RW3, it is my conviction that the commission did its best by restarting the gadgets, so referred as troubleshooting method, changing SD cards, and by use of contingency kits available for technology failed them. Concerning the allegation that there was external interference and manipulation of the KIMS kits so as to distort final results, it's a matter of proof. There was no evidence that used to corroborate that allegation that there was manipulation so intended deliberately to distort the results. As to whether the vendor's manual would have saved the situation, there is no proof either. It's common knowledge that even on ordinary day-to-day application of household electrical appliances or electronic appliances, use of manuals does not guarantee a solution automatically. Touching on the question of failure to apply end-to-end testing, RW1 stated that the commission did preliminary and necessary testing, including simulation exercise. According to the commission, end-to-end testing does not include or involve opening kits before voting hours could commence. It should be appreciated that the electronic gadgets used during elections are not supposed to be complex in application, but simple. If by simple application of ordinary commands, the kits could not work, elections could not completely stop simply because an omission in terms of ill-preparedness had occurred, yet there was an available option. Equally, an election result cannot be nullified or invalidated merely because there were minor omissions in preparation, yet there was an alternative method of voting. Although parties could not agree on what end-to-end testing entails, non-conformity alone could not receive the results realized through another lawful method, in this case, manual voting. I did not quite understand whether the petitioner was asking the court to nullify election results or IBC to go back and train itself first on end-to-end testing before it could hold fresh elections. I also do not understand how poor training could have affected only the Kibwezi West constituency and not another constituency within the same county where common training was done, yet others were not affected. I am convinced that the kits failure had a more underlying technical hitch, which was complex to resolve within the shortest time possible, hence the alternative method, voting method. In any event, the fact of poor training and testing was not unique to any particular candidate, but affected all candidates, and therefore nobody benefited or got preferential treatments more than the other as a consequence. As to the fraud process of procurement of the KIMS kits, there is no proof or evidence demonstrating how Kibwezi West could have been isolated out of the over 50,000 KIMS kits nationally procured from a common source. In my view, the claim that the process of procurement was fraud is a national issue and is far-fetched in this matter. Taking everything into context, there was no proof of any intended mischief or deliberate human interference in relation to the failed kits. Whether manual voting compromised the credibility, verifiability, integrity, accountability, and transparency of the declared results. The significance of election voting cannot be underscored. It is convenient in engagement and time-friendly. However, it is prone to fail, hence the reason why Parliament enacted Rule 26 of the Elections Technology Regulation 2017, which provides the Commission shall suspend or terminate the use of election technology if the reliability of a system cannot be assured according to the requirement of the Act and these regulations. 2, before suspending or terminating the use of election technology under sub-regulation 1, A, the clerk at the polling station shall inform the presiding officer of the failure of the technology. B, the presiding officer at the polling station shall retry the system to confirm the failure of technology. C, the presiding officer at the polling station shall document the instant on an instant report in the polling station diary, which shall be signed by all agents. D, the presiding officer shall notify the returning officer of the failure and submit a copy of the instant report. E, the returning officer shall inform the director in charge of information communication and technology of the incident, and the director shall investigate the incident and advise on the suspension or termination of the use of election technology. F, the returning officer shall approve the request for suspension of the use of technology based on the advice under paragraph E and invoke the complementary mechanism. 3, when the commission suspends or terminates the use of the election technology, the commission shall immediately notify the public and the stakeholders of the suspension and of the measures put in place to start there or of any failure of technologies or procedures to be used according to the operations continuity plan. 4, where the commission has made a decision to suspend the voting where there is failure of the election technology, the commission shall extend the hours of polling at the polling station where polling has been interrupted by the amount of time which has been lost. 5, the commission shall publish a notice through electronic or print media of national circulation or any other easily accessible medium to notify the public of the suspension or termination or of failure of our technology or procedures to be used according to the operations continuity plan. 6, the commission shall inform the returning officer of the decision accordingly. In the same spirit, the Court of Appeal appreciated in the case of United Democratic Alliance Party aforesaid that technology was prone to fail, hence sanctioned use of manual register, subject to observance of certain guidelines, among them use of biometrics for voter identification, in default, use of alphanumeric search in the presence of agents and the voter to fill from that 4A, and in default, resort to printed register of voters after approval from the commission. If I were to strictly interpret the Court of Appeal guidelines, note number 2 and 3, I would arrive at the conclusion that where the kit completely fails, only approval from the commission is required, a printed register and nothing more. That from that 2A would be already be required where alphanumeric is applicable. Nevertheless, the petitioner stated that from that 2A was not filled in the affected 84 polling stations. On the other hand, Article 2 and 3 told the court that upon receiving the commission's approval to use the manual register, they quickly communicated the presiding officers to use the manual register and supply voters with from that 2A, that they printed the said forms in large numbers to meet the demand. The petitioner persistently argued that that process was not followed and that he did not fill that form, hence a fraud voting process. During the hearing of the scrutiny application, the court did not find it necessary to conduct scrutiny to ascertain whether voters filled from that 2A. This was informed from the background that the petitioner was on official inspection as no voter or agent from any of the affected polling stations ever gave evidence to that effect. This claim was further defeated by the Supreme Court decision, which had earlier on conducted scrutiny in a number of Kibwezi West constituency, where a similar complaint was made during the Raila versus Ruto 2022 presidential election petition, and in which case the court found that from that 2A was duly filled, and that manual voting in Kibwezi West and Kakamega County, where similar failure was reported, did not serve any prejudice. In the said case, the court held as follows, and I quote, whereas Kim's kits failed in 235 polling stations in Kibwezi West constituency and parts of Kakamega County, 86,889 voters were granted the right to vote manually, and the requisite forms that 2A duly filled. The failure of the Kim's kits in the identified polling station could not be taken as a yardstick of the performance of Kim's kits in the whole country. All affected voters who could have complained were not disenfranchised, as they were able to exercise their democratic right to vote manually. End of quotes. Based on the above holding by the Supreme Court, and considering that this court was being persuaded to repeat a similar exercise, I found it to be a waste of judicial time to embark on a scrutiny to find out an outcome that had already been ascertained by the apex court in the land. To that extent, there was no proof that a fundamental process was not followed so as to render the results invalid. Regarding the question of voter suppression on account of delayed voting, the answer lies on the extension of time lost. It was admitted by all parties that it took time to resolve the problem on electronic failure and subsequently seek approval from the commission. It was mandatory that approval had to be sought after trying everything possible. Various officers were involved, hence getting approval was a process. Although voting commenced at 12 midday, voters who were willing to vote were given an opportunity to do so. Time was indeed extended to compensate for the time lost. Samples of forms showing polling stations closing past 11 p.m. and 12 midnight were attached to the second respondent, Max Emerald 3. Nobody came forward to complain that he was denied an opportunity to vote. Indeed, no voter in Kibwezi West constituency was disenfranchised by virtue of the failure of technology. This position was affirmed by the Supreme Court itself in the said Raila versus Ruto case 2022 election petition. If there was anybody who did not vote, it was out of choice. Regarding the claim that manual voting affected voter turnout, the same can be ascertained from figures on voter turnout analysis submitted by the first respondent, showing the performance of each constituency as follows. Haiti 63.72%, Kibwezi East 57.2%, West 58.61%, Kilome 59.79%, Makueni 59.92%, and Mboni 62.83%. It is clear from these figures that the marginal difference was nominal, negligible, and inevitable. In fact, even Kibwezi East, where voting was electronic, it performed poorly than Kibwezi West with manual voting. This proved that manual voting per se did not necessarily impact negatively on the right to vote to Kibwezi West voters as claimed by the petitioner. In my view, if manual voting had any effect on voter turnout, then it did not affect the petitioner alone, but rather all candidates in the race, including other elective positions. In a nutshell, I do not find any evidence to establish that as a result of manual voting, the outcome was not credible, verifiable, accountable, and transparent. Whether the first respondent carried out the verification, tallying, and declaration of results in accordance with the applicable laws. The petitioner alleged that the tallying process was characterized by irregularities such as inflation of results in polling stations, where more people voted than registered in the King's kits, hence lack of transparency in tabulation of results. He alleged that the first respondent did not adduce as evidence from the 7 A's to show how tabulation of results was done, and the results supposed to be signed by the agents who are not signed. Regulation 76 of the Election General Regulations 2012 provides the procedure of counting of votes and provided as follows. 1. The presiding officer shall, in the presence of the candidates or agents, A, open each ballot box and empty its content onto the counting table or another facility provided for the purpose, and shall cause to be counted the votes received by each candidate. B, record the total number of votes cast in favor of each candidate. 2, each ballot paper shall be counted as follows. A, the presiding officer shall, in respect to every ballot paper, announce the candidates in whose favor the vote was cast. B, display to the candidates or agents the ballot paper sufficiently for them to ascertain the vote. C, put the ballot paper at the place on the accounting table or other facility provided for this purpose, set for the candidates in whose favor it was cast. 3, the presiding officer shall record the count of the votes in a tallying sheet from that day set out in the statute. 4, a candidate or an agent shall have a right A, to dispute the inclusion in the count of a ballot paper, or B, object to the rejection of a ballot paper, whereupon the presiding officer may decide to uphold or reject the complaint and act as provided under Regulation 80. From the testimony of Item 2, the constituency returning officer, after he received from that 7A from presiding officers at the constituency tallying center, he populated from that 7B in the presence of agents representing all candidates who signed the requisite form for declaration and transmission of results to the county returning officer, who also populated from that 7C and declared the winner as governor without an objection. That the petitioner was represented by one Kingola Mutusi, who signed the result declaration form as an agent. It was the petitioner's case or claim that he did not have an agent at the tallying center as stated. There is nothing on record to show that there were any anomalies or irregularities in the manner in which verification, tallying, and declaration of result was done. It is inconceivable for the petitioner to claim that voter verification was not properly done and the result inflated, yet he has no proof. None of the agents or voters came forward to claim the specific station or stations where such anomalies or malpractices occurred. This is a generalized allegation which lacks substantiation. On the aspect of 4 polling stations where votes cast exceeded registered voters. The same was explained and discarded, hence nobody gained out of it. Consequently, I do not find any ground upon which to find that there were glaring irregularities or malpractices in verification, tallying, and the declaration of results of such magnitude as to vitiate the results. Whether there were unexplainable discrepancies between the votes cast for the position of governor and the elected position. It is the petitioner's case that there were unexplained discrepancies in respect to the votes cast for the 6th elected position. To illustrate the discrepancies, the petitioner indicated that the total votes cast for each position were presidency 290, 491, governor 281, 289, 538, senator 290, 550, and women rep 269, 465 votes. According to the petitioner, no explanation was given to justify the differences, yet each voter was given 6 powers. In response, the first respondent, through the affidavit of Morris Keboy Raria, sworn on 20th September at paragraph 27, explained the reason why the said discrepancies were occurred. He stated that a result for county women rep in Kasheria Primary School, Kaseuni Nursery School, Kivini Primary School, and Komboyo were disregarded as the votes cast exceeded the number of registered voters. No governor and women rep results were received from Kankilaka Primary and Katurimbi Primary, as the same one is placed, thus calling for police action. No votes were cast at Uvuti Primary for the position of senator, as the station did not receive Senate ballot papers, and lastly, there were spoiled and stray votes which were accounted for in the polling station diary. According to the analysis presented by both parties, the difference between the presidential votes and the governor was 1,001 in favor of the presidency, while that between the governor and the senator was 1,060 in favor of senator. There is no dispute that there were discrepancies in votes cast in the 4 aforesaid county elected positions. I have taken into account the total votes cast vis-a-vis the votes garnered by each candidate, as well as the difference in terms of votes cast for each position. The third respondent garnered 214,088 votes against the petitioner in second position with 63,252. Taking into account the explanation given to justify the said discrepancies, I am satisfied that discrepancies were not so deliberately created with any mischief in mind. The explanation given is convincing. In any event, the discrepancies in question are negligible as to vitiate any election result. It is tried that in any election exercise, minor infractions, omissions, and commissions are bound to occur. The discrepancies in question are not so glaring so as to call for nullification of election results. In the case of Raila versus Ruto presidential election petition of 2022 Supra, the Supreme Court at paragraph 285 restated its position in Raila 2017 presidential election petition at paragraph 373, where it was held that not every irregularity or procedural infraction is enough to invalidate an election. That the irregularities must be of such a profound nature as to affect the actual result or the integrity of an election for a court of law to nullify the same. Similar position was held in Wabini and Leti versus IPC and Forwarders 2013 KRR, where the court held that an election is a human endeavor and is not carried out by programmed machines. It went on to state that perfection is an inspiration, but allowance must be made for human error. Hence, what's paramount is that in the such errors, the ultimate will of the people is ascertained and upheld. This position was also held by the Supreme Court in Gadirao Peter Munya versus Dixon Mwenda Gidinji and 2 others 2014 KRR, where it was stated that no election shall be declared to be void by reason of non-compliance with any written law relating to that election if it appears that the election was conducted in accordance with the principles laid down in the Constitution and in the written law, or that non-compliance did not affect the results of an election. Having taken into account the wide margin between the petition and the third respondent, the alleged errors, omissions, or irregularities leading to the discrepancies in terms of tallying votes cast for each elected position do not, in my view, raise any red flag. Indeed, as stated in the case of Mercy Kirito Mutegi versus Beatrice Mukada Nyaga and 2 others 2013 KRR, not every non-compliance or every act of omission or breach of elections regulations or procedure can render an election invalid. In a nutshell, the petitioner has not established the required standard how the vote discrepancies affected the validity of the election source, whether the third respondent was validly elected. Mr. Kimathi submitted on this issue on 2 aspects. Firstly, an election is not about numbers, but a process. In his view, the Makueni gubernatorial election exercise was tainted with irregularities that rendered the declared results invalid. Secondly, that the delayed time of voting occasioned by various King's kits rendered the whole exercise a sham, as over 91,000 voters were hindered from voting. On the other hand, the respondents maintained that the huge margin in numbers of the votes garnered by the third respondent is a clear manifestation that he was validly elected even without the entire West constituency votes. Whereas an election per se is not about numbers, but the process employed before realizing those numbers, winners are also determined by the highest number of votes obtained in an election. Numbers are therefore equally important and critical, especially where the gap is so expansive, such that to nullify the results based on minor infraction would be akin to disenfranchising some voters, disenfranchising all voters their right to vote. In this regard, I refer to Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission versus Minor KIA and 5 others 2017 PRR, where the Court of Appeal held that numbers are not unimpeachable. They are everything in an election. Having found that there were no glaring irregularities or malpractice of such a magnitude as to render the election result herein invalid, it goes without saying that the third respondent was validly elected, thus reflecting the will of the people of Makueni County. The ultimate objective of any competitive election is to elect leaders who represent the will and the choice of the people through universal suffrage. In this regard, I found the case of Justine Ringa Chirume and the 2 others versus Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission and 3 others, election petition number E005 of 2022, where the court that where irregularities in an election petition are not established, the will of the people should be upheld, whether the relief sought can issue. According to the petition, so many reliefs, including scrutiny, were sought. Having disposed of the application for scrutiny, the same is not applicable here. Equally, having heard that the third respondent was validly elected, I do not find any relevant relief to grant the petitioner, who is to bear costs. Authority to award costs is provided under Section 84 of the Elections Act and Rule 30 of the Elections Parliamentary and County Elections Petition Rules 2017. Ordinarily, costs for the event. However, the court has discretion to determine who bears costs and how much, depending on the circumstances of the case. In this regard, I refer to the case of Dennis Magari Makori and another first Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, PRS 2018, PRL, and Mada Wangari Karua versus Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission and 3 others 2018, PRL, where the court held that when determining whether to award costs or not, the court should be guided by the principles of fairness, justice, and access to justice. Indeed, an award of costs should not be treated like a commercial enterprise and a hindrance to the right to access justice. Therefore, fairness and circumstances of each case shall be some of the factors to take into consideration. In this case, I have considered the time taken in preparation of the pleadings, prosecuting the petition, the complexity of the matter, and the number of counsel involved. In the circumstances, I do award the respondents costs capped at a maximum of 3 million, out of which the first and second respondent, being government agents, supported by taxpayers' money, shall share 1 million equally and 2 million to the third respondent. Before concluding this matter, I wish to appreciate and recognize the sobriety with which parties conducted themselves throughout the proceedings. I also wish to thank counsel engaged in these proceedings for exhibiting a high degree of professionalism and appreciation of the law, maturity, and utmost respect when addressing each other. Lastly, I also wish to acknowledge judicial staff deployed to assist the court for their dedication and commitment to duty. Having heard as above, the following are the final orders of the court. A, the petition hearing is hereby dismissed. B, that the gubernatorial elections held on 9th August 2022 in Makueni County were constitutionally and validly held. C, that the third respondent hearing, Mutula was validly elected and represented the governor of Makueni County. 4, that the petitioners shall bear costs of the petition assessed and payable at 1 million shillings to the first and second respondents jointly and in equal amounts, and 2 million shillings to the third respondents. E, a certificate of determination in accordance with Section 861 of the Elections Act to issue to the IBC and the Speaker of the Senate. Those are the orders of the courts, and that's the end of the judgments. that on that note, I come to the end of the reading of the judgments. One or two corrections to be made, which I will take less than an hour to do. In 2 hours' time, you get your judgment. We have a challenge with the proceedings because of the scribed process you will introduce. Some challenges have caused the staff to type my handwritten proceedings, then you decide which ones to use. So a report will be available. And I've also directed that the further proofread the transcribed proceedings. So the proceedings might take a little bit longer, maybe more than not 2 weeks, but a week.